Here's a joke for you. A Vietnam War veteran, a first-year college dropout, a junior systems analyst, and a biker walk into a bar. They take a couple of shots and leave. I mean escape. I forgot to mention this takes place during a zombie apocalypse. I fuck up the punchline of that joke every time. 13 years ago, Valve published arguably one of the greatest cooperative shooters to ever exist. Upon announcement, Gabe Newell said in a press release, what Counter-Strike did for multiplayer action games, Left 4 Dead will do for co-op games. The game's developer Turtle Rock Studios was founded by Chris Ashton, Phil Robb, and Michael Booth. Before starting their own company, the three were involved with the team responsible for Counter-Strike, a multiplayer mod for the single-player game Half-Life. This caught the attention of the game's publisher Valve, which purchased the mod and officially published the game as a standalone title. After forming Turtle Rock, the team was regularly contracted by Valve to work on their IPs. They worked on several mods, expansions, and an Xbox port of Counter-Strike. 2004 saw the release of Valve's Source engine, which powered titles like Half-Life 2 and Counter-Strike Source. The engine boasted impressive facial animations, groundbreaking physics simulation, and a dynamic rendering range. This inspired the team at Turtle Rock to develop an original IP of their own. That following year, they pitched their prototype to Valve. They presented a modified version of Counter-Strike's code, a proof of concept, titled Terror Strike. The gameplay involved a team of players fighting off hordes of knife-wielding zombies controlled by AI. This concept would later be fleshed out to the game we know today as Left 4 Dead. Early gameplay revealed a far darker tone than the finished product. Environments were notably more drab, and the color palette was muted. More apparent than all that was the four main survivors. They had a grittier look to match the game's setting.
Hunter! Get off me!
At E3 2008, Left 4 Dead made its final public appearance before releasing later that year. They debuted a new look for the survivors, and environments saw a much needed update. The characters' redesigns came from player feedback and something the team called read hierarchy, which meant that players need to be able to see where their teammates are at any given moment. Simplifying the designs allowed players to easily identify the silhouettes of teammates. They even went as far as heightening their contrast to be more distinguished from backgrounds. This is when Left 4 Dead started to take shape, and I give huge credit to Valve's in-house team who worked alongside Turtle Rock. Earlier that year, Valve made the relationship official by purchasing the studio. Their involvement is a big reason why the game ended up becoming such a massive success. Valve's team was involved with, but not limited to, marketing, writing the story, composing the orchestral arrangements, level design, emotional support, casting, face modeling, financial support, art direction, animation, and providing the AI technology along with everything the Source engine supported at the time. Released on November 17th, 2008, Left 4 Dead was met with high praise from critics and gamers everywhere. It managed to sell over 2 million copies in under a year. It didn't sell quite as much as other popular titles, but considering this was a brand new IP and not a sequel to an established series, it's all the more impressive. You probably have fond memories playing this game at the height of the US Great Recession while your parents argued over losing the house in the other room. I was first introduced to Left 4 Dead at my cousin's house on the Xbox 360. We always gravitated towards competitive multiplayer games, but Left 4 Dead was different. We were on the same team and encouraged to keep one another alive by any means necessary. From the beginning, Left 4 Dead was designed with cooperative gameplay in mind. In an interview with VentureBeat, Phil Robb said he wanted to create a game where players work together on the same team. In his experience, competitive multiplayer games always ended with one person getting really upset.
Dead. Headshot.
The strongest quality a co-op game can have is keeping the second player invested regardless of skill level. This is what separated Left 4 Dead from other titles released that year. The 7th console generation's market was flooded with generic military shooters. It was a post-Call of Duty Modern Warfare world, and if you weren't downing a Halo 3 limited edition Mountain Dew, then you weren't really gaming. Most of these games featured some type of multiplayer co-op, but it was never implemented as well as Left 4 Dead. From the same Rob interview, he says, "There are a lot of games out there that let you be on the same team, but ultimately, you're just kind of doing your own thing." Left 4 Dead is co-op at its very best. In order to succeed, you need to rely on your teammates. Keeping each other alive and out of harm's way is essential to your survival. You don't want to end up Left 4 Dead. Or, at the very least, you don't want to be kicked out of an online match because your teammates are speedrunning the level, leaving you behind to die. The game's emphasis on co-op makes the zombie apocalypse the perfect setting. As Bertrand Russell once said, "The only thing that will redeem mankind is cooperation." I think we can all appreciate the relevance of that now.
Was that on the back of a beer mat?
Yeah, it was Guinness Extra Cold.
I won't say anything.
Thanks.
Each campaign starts your team off in a semi-safe location with health packs and weapons to equip. Your goal is to navigate through hordes of common infected to reach the safe room at the end of every level. It just takes one infected to slow you down. If you're not quick to react, more are sure to latch on, and before you know it, you're surrounded. Why are all the infected the same height? Adding to the chaos are special infected. They possess mutated abilities, each serving a different purpose. More on this later. Every campaign has a finale where survivors call for rescue and hold out in one location, fighting off waves of infected until help arrives. This is where the game throws everything at the survivors, and their teamwork is tested to the fullest extent. What keeps this game feeling fresh all these years later is the AI Director, a machine learning algorithm that closely monitors a team's performance and adjusts the difficulty accordingly. It controls variables like enemy spawn rate and how often you'll find weapons or healing items. This unpredictability is key to the game's longevity. Even for the most skilled players, you never quite know what to expect. The campaign No Mercy serves as the game's introduction and is the most quintessential in terms of level design. The earliest campaign the development team worked on, it's no wonder why it's the most polished. Even in early builds of the game, you can see structurally it remained fairly consistent with the retail release. The development team wanted players to feel as if they were dropped off in the midst of an apocalyptic event. As a result, there isn't a tutorial level, at least not in the traditional sense. The intro cinematic serves that purpose and visually demonstrates all of the necessary information before setting up the scenario of the first campaign.
To anyone who can hear this, proceed to Mercy Hospital for evacuation. Repeat, proceed to Mercy Hospital for evacuation.
Without wasting any time, the game throws you into the action, and the goal is immediately apparent. No Mercy Hospital is designed to be the tallest building in the skyline. The neon sign and searchlights become a beacon of hope for the player. As you progress through the campaign, the hospital appears closer and closer. It's almost always in the player's view, serving as a constant reminder of what's at stake. Emerging from the sewers at the end of the third level to be greeted by the enormous structure has got to be one of the most rewarding experiences to be had. At the end of the following chapter, you enter the hospital and find yourself on an exposed floor that was left in a state of arrested development. Overseeing the city's grim skyline is an almost whimsical moment in an otherwise desolate game. This view allows players to reflect on all the bloodshed that brought them to this very moment. It feels like a As iconic as the other campaigns are, they do lack in comparison to No Mercy's sense of progression, perceived scale, and location variety. In No Mercy, you visit an apartment building, a subway station, a generator room, Five Guys, a loading dock, the sewers, a hospital, and its rooftop. In a campaign like Blood Harvest, you go through a forest, train tracks, a forest that leads you to train tracks, a farm in the middle of the forest, train tracks, and a farm in the middle of the forest. I understand the point of that campaign was to follow the train tracks to locate the military, but it completely misses the sense of progression, scale, and variety that campaigns like No Mercy exceed in. It seems like there's a lot of assets being reused. The game launched with only 4 campaigns, which admittedly was short even for the time. I speculate the development team, now going by Valve South, was on a tight corporate mandated schedule. It's possible they spent a majority of their resources refining the game's engine and core co-op design instead of creating new assets for location variety. Left 4 Dead was announced in 2006 and gameplay was shown off that following year. If you compare the 2007 demo alongside footage from 2008's build of the game, you start to see some very stark differences. You can clearly see the UI hasn't been updated yet and still uses the character models from the beta. It's possible that leading up to its release, the game was still being worked on. I'm certain if Valve pushed the game's release back, the team could have fleshed out some really great ideas that were otherwise left on the cutting room floor. I guess they'd have to hold off until DLC, or a sequel, if ever announced. More on this later. I remember as a young boy feeling disappointed because there weren't any cutscenes like the intro sprinkled throughout the 4 campaigns. I wanted to see the survivors interact with each other between rescues. Turns out that was exactly what developers had in mind.
We experimented with a variety of different introductions for each campaign. For No Mercy, we tried a 40-second fly-in of the helicopter to give the player a more movie-like introduction to the game. Ultimately, we found that such elaborate cutscenes are hard to watch over and over in a game that's built for replayability.
Despite only having 1 cutscene, the game achieves a cinematic feel like no other. Most of the video game industry doesn't seem to comprehend what makes an interactive experience truly cinematic. I don't care if the graphics are super detailed and I can see the pores of my character. What makes a video game cinematic is the feeling a player gets from what's behind those pores, an emotional connection. Left 4 Dead demonstrates a far better understanding of what makes a video game cinematic than most AAA games released today. The story of Left 4 Dead is strategically unfolded in front of the player in real time, with campaigns leading into another with continuity intact.
Pilot's license revoked. Dun dun dun!
Environments are filled with tiny details, giving you a small glimpse of what has happened to this world 2 weeks after the first infection of a new virus. It leaves a stronger impression that way because your imagination fills out the missing context. There's a lot of minor details that you might have missed in the background that tell a deeper story of loss, tragedy, and the collapse of society. The ambient tracks that accompany each campaign in particular enhance the game's eeriness. If you pay close attention, you can hear gunshots and even explosions in the far distance, from possibly the military or other survivors in a losing battle. The ambient noises, coupled with the graffiti on the walls, gives you the impression that other survivors were once here, but you were too late to reach them. What keeps this game from becoming a depressing slog is its charming cast of characters. Bill, Francis, Zoe, and Lewis are some of the most memorable characters in video game history. 4 unlikely strangers take on the world. Their conflicting personalities make up some of the funniest exchanges in game.
When things go back to normal, Zoe, Bill, I'm giving you both jobs. Francis, I'm gonna teach your ass how to read.
Go to hell!
The voice acting talents of Earl Alexander, Jim French, Jen Taylor, and Vince Valenzuela help bring these characters alive. There's a line of dialogue for almost every occasion. Some specific lines can only be triggered under specific actions or sometimes rare circumstances. I've been playing this game for over a decade now, and I'm still discovering lines that I've never heard before.
You maniacs! You blew it up! God damn you! God damn you all to hell!
You quickly grow attached to these characters and feel for their loss whenever a teammate meets their untimely end.
Lewis didn't make it. Oh, Christ.
Has anyone else found it a bit weird that this M-rated game doesn't feature the word fuck? Each survivor was designed to play the same, which allows the player to decide which role they want to fill in for their team. I personally like to play the medic.
Let me heal you up.
Someone want to give me a hand?
To get the most out of this game, you really want to be playing with either friends or other players online. Communication is ultimately what will prevail. The computer players are functional, but they do fuck up at dire situations. 5 months after the game's release, Valve published the first round of DLC titled Survival Pack. Available for the low price of free, PC and Xbox players were treated to a new game type, Survival. This pits a team of survivors against a never-ending horde of infected. Survival maps included were either finales or crescendo events found in the campaign. A new map was designed exclusively for this game mode, titled The Last Stand. It takes place at a lighthouse in an alternate reality where the survivors meet a terrible fate. In addition to this new game type, 2 already existing campaigns were made available to play online in Versus mode. Valve South made small adjustments to both campaigns and effectively balanced out the Versus experience for both survivors and special infected. This included adding more spaces for special infected players to spawn, and removing exploitable areas for survivors to camp. The reason why these Versus campaigns weren't already available to play online on release day wasn't made publicly clear as far as I know. I speculate it has something to do with Valve rushing the title's development, leaving the team to work on it as post-launch content. 6 months after Survival Pack's release, a proper form of DLC followed up. Crash Course was an entirely new campaign built from the ground up. It was meant to bridge the gap between No Mercy and Death Toll. This short 2-chapter campaign was designed with competitive Versus mode in mind. The team at Valve South observed that players in an online Versus match tend to drop out before a campaign properly concluded. Their solution to this was to design a shorter campaign focused on competitive play. On PC, this DLC was free, but on Microsoft's Xbox 360, they were charging $6.99. Why? Because Microsoft hates you and thinks you're stupid. So of course I bought it. Left 4 Dead 2 was announced 3 months before Crash Course's release. So let's talk about that now.
Last time I saw my grandmother, she asked me was I still a praying man. I told her, yes ma'am. Well, she says, pray harder.
Whoa, what the hell? Oh, Dead Rising. This can't be Left 4 Dead. Oh my god, dude, you're kidding me. Left 4 Dead 2 already.
November 17th, was it?
I think that's what it said. Holy shit. Left 4 Dead 2. That is ridiculous. A year later.
This announcement caught everyone by surprise. Valve wasn't a company known for putting out a sequel this early. They were known as the company to wait for technologic innovations to influence the direction a project takes. There were people who welcomed this surprising change of pace, and others who felt this would invalidate Left 4 Dead as a priority for future content.
I don't want to hate on Left 4 Dead 2. I'm about to hate on the haters.
A boycott group was organized on Valve's online platform Steam shortly after the game's announcement. The group believed the sequel's new content did not warrant a standalone release. They non-violently suggested it be available as DLC for the first game instead. Their group vowed to stay celibate and not indulge in the sequel until their concerns were properly addressed by Valve. The boycott group garnered enough attention to be featured in various gaming-related news media outlets, where they were mocked and portrayed as entitled children.
Shut the hell up, and quit bitching about the game. And 3, if you don't like it, don't buy it. You know, yeah, there's freedom of speech.
The public's perception wasn't too far off. In response to the free DLC Crash Course, the group's co-founder wrote, "Only 2 chapters? Come on now. Are your employees on vacation? Is that good enough for our 8 months of patience? Who is actually excited for this? You can laugh at haters who will download this DLC in September. If it weren't for us, this DLC wouldn't have been possible. It's true. Oh yes, it's true. Let me ask you this. Have you ever met anyone who's complained about getting something for free? In response to the boycott, Valve personally invited the 2 leading members to their office in Washington to address their concerns in person. Not only that, they allowed them to demo the sequel's beta before anyone else behind closed doors. They were encouraged to ask the development team any question they had about the upcoming sequel and planned DLC for the first game. Left 4 Dead 2 went on to become Valve's fastest selling game at that point. In less than a month, the sequel managed to sell over 2 million copies. To give you perspective, it took the original 4 months to sell that many. The title was a marketing juggernaut, fueled by a $25 million advertising campaign, a massive upgrade compared to the original's $10 million. Valve spared no expense. While researching for this video, I stumbled upon a Twitter profile with the handle Ducktail Sugar, which may or may not ring a bell. It's the sugarcane processing mill found in Hard Rain. There's no way to verify if this was an official account created by Valve, but their tweets appear to be addressing the in-game virus, the green flu. They also created a website for the fictional in-game band, the Midnight Riders, where they posted updates on their tour blog. Let's read the final post titled "Green Flu Don't Stop the Effin' Riders." You might have heard about a lot of bands canceling their tours this week because of all the airports shutting down and the government telling people to stay indoors. To that, the writers say, "We'll stop touring when we stop breathing." I wonder if they ever made it out alive. That summer, Valve went on a full-on summer tour, showcasing the sequel at different live events everywhere, except Wyoming. They were showing off this new installment while simultaneously advertising DLC for the first game. It felt like a conflict of interest, but it worked out spectacularly in Valve's favor. You probably have fond memories playing this game at the end of the US Great Recession while your parents finalized their divorce papers in the other room. So how do I put this? Left 4 Dead 2 is one of the greatest sequels of all time. Everything that made the first title so great is done so much better here. Almost every critique I had of the first installment was addressed beyond my expectations. The level variety alone triumphs over the original and features not 4, but 5 campaigns, each with their own distinct identity. This time, instead of Pennsylvania, Left 4 Dead 2 takes place in the Deep South. You visit iconic locations related to the region like an alligator farm, a shopping mall, the swamp, an amusement park, a gun shop, a gas station, a cane field, a concert stadium, a backwards hick town, and the inside of Jimmy Gibbs Jr.'s stock car. Each campaign features their own uncommon common infected that appear wearing a wardrobe consistent with that environment. This includes CETA workers in Dead Center, Mudmen in Swamp Fever, clowns in Dark Carnival, and goddammit, Jimmy Gibbs Jr.'s reanimated corpse. Sorry about this. Their appearance isn't merely cosmetic like the first game. They can affect gameplay like dropping weapons, are immune to fire, or their squeaky clown shoes are alerting nearby infected of your presence. Another small detail that helps each campaign feel different from one another are the musical cues. They are reused from the first title, but each campaign has a unique rendition using instruments appropriate for that environment.
Come on, people, come on, get in here!
The sequel features by far the most diverse set of locations, each with its own unique feel and sound. In comparison, all the campaigns from the first game, excluding the DLC and Blood Harvest, took place at night. This didn't help the game feel any less copy and pasted, but there was a reason for this. In a game as dark as Left 4 Dead, developers noticed that players instinctively travel towards well-lit areas. The darkness allowed the level designers to strategically place environmental lighting to unconsciously guide players in the right direction. The sequel challenges this notion by having the majority of its campaigns take place in broad daylight. In order to keep players on track, the developers designed subtle environmental cues and visual landmarks, often on higher planes, to capture the player's attention. One of my favorite examples of these two concepts working in tandem is found in The Parish. This campaign sees the survivors in New Orleans following the freeway overhead to a military evacuation site on the other side of the city. Early in the third chapter, you come across a roadblock and see this two-story building beside it. This setting sun perfectly highlights the second story, giving you the impression that this area is accessible and can be used to walk over the obstruction. If that detail wasn't enough, a well-placed object in the distance illuminates a nearby staircase. Subtle environmental cues like this are integral to Left 4 Dead's fast-paced design, because the AI will punish survivors for staying in one place for too long. The sequel introduces a new cast of survivors. Rochelle, a determined and witty news station producer. Ellis, a naive young man and mechanic. Coach, a high school football defensive coordinator and overall sweetheart. Nick, a gambling drifter and con man who slowly grows on you, like a tumor. It must have been a difficult task to not only create 4 new characters, but to have them be as memorable as the first cast. But god damn it, did they hit this one out of the park too.
That's a home run.
Pre-order Left 4 Dead 2 at GameStop and get an exclusive in-game baseball bat. Power to the players.
Valve went through an acting talent agency and found 4 actors who lent a scan of their face to be used in-game. They also motion captured their performances in costume. They went through hundreds of different scenarios, poses, and emotions to give the survivors an authentic sense of personality. They did this for the first game as well. All of this means the faces of these fictional characters exist IRL. They're out there, wandering through this same earth as you and I. I fear one day coming across one of them and suffering a small heart attack.
I can't wait to get you out on that field and fuck your ass.
The AI got a considerable upgrade this time around. It now has the authorization to change terrains in specific areas depending on the survivor's performance. In the campaign Dead Center, a crescendo event is triggered by the mall's security alarm. The AI can have players activate this alarm by either opening a door on the bottom floor or bashing through the toy store's window on the second. The development team refers to these crescendo events as gauntlets. Unlike the first title, which saw players camping in one spot until said event was completed, the sequel incentivizes survivors to push forward through hordes of infected to manually shut it off. Left 4 Dead used a similar concept in campaigns like Dead Air, but the difference is you don't feel the satisfaction of stopping the event, you only get a sense of relief getting through it. Both equally function, but the sequel takes this idea much further. One of the most anticipated additions the sequel advertised was an updated roster of weapons, but more specifically the introduction of the melee variety. This included baseball bats, frying pans, katanas, Shaun of the Dead baseball bats, and chainsaws to name a few. This game was initially banned in Australia and censored by Germany's rating board. The latter decision wasn't overturned until 2021, over a decade after its release. In addition to the melee weapons, we got biobombs, heroin, grenade launchers, combat rifles, magnums, and everyone's favorite, chrome shotgun.
Rochelle!
Each weapon has unique characteristics that can be visually demonstrated on the infected. The devs included over 700 unique ways to penetrate, dismember, bash, and decapitate the infected population. The sound effects are also really fucking satisfying. I think it's important to note that I'm playing Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 on PC. I feel that I have to make this distinction because Valve tends to abandon their console ports while they shower their PC versions with updates years after its initial launch. If you're playing Left 4 Dead on Xbox, you're experiencing basically the same game as it was originally released. On PC, every new addition the sequel received was later added to the original at no extra cost. This included weapons, special infected, and advanced visual damage to the infected. The Xbox port had the infected hit the ground like sandbags, but on PC you can physically see the damage inflicted on them. Chances are if you're still playing Left 4 Dead Online, you're either playing through its campaigns or versus mode. These two seem to be the most popular game types, while others feel like abandoned ghost towns. The latter seems to be the most populated game mode, and for good reason. It's 4 survivors against 4 special infected. Each team takes turns working as either offense or defense throughout a campaign. Just like the main game, cooperation is key. Special infected need to coordinate attacks just as much as survivors need to stick together. Each special infected has unique abilities that can be effective given the right circumstances. If the survivors are camping in one spot, a spitter can easily force them to evacuate with their acidic spit. It doubles the damage the longer the survivors are exposed to it. Bonus points if you can work with a teammate and spit on a pinned survivor. A charger can easily knock a group of survivors down like bowling pins. It can also do cool shit like this.
Nice.
Each special infected has a unique musical cue that accompanies their spawn, alerting the other team. Not only that, their gnarly growls can tip off survivors of their nearby presence. If you want to cause optimal damage, work together as a team. I don't often run into players online who have headsets, but you can almost always coordinate an effective strategy if you can visually see each other's proximity to survivors. The rest comes down to timing. The tank is a perfect example of how teamwork can be effective for both sides. A special infected powerhouse, the tank can be fatal, but can easily be defeated if all survivors are dealing damage from a safe distance. It's up to the special infected team to distract or even obscure the vision of survivors to allow the tank to attack. Like I always say, if you're playing as a tank and the survivor's health is green, wait for your infected team. So what about the other game modes? These two seem to be the most popular game types, while others feel like abandoned ghost towns. Left 4 Dead 2 is a near perfect sequel, but is it better than the original? Well, don't quote me on this, but Left 4 Dead 2 is objectively the superior title. Everything you love about the first installment is done so much better here, but Left 4 Dead will always be my favorite. I've poured countless hours playing this one and I don't see myself ever stopping. I acknowledge its shortcomings, but I still embrace the foundation it built for its superior sequel to surpass. Whenever I'm ready to log off for the day, I always make sure to at least play through No Mercy in its entirety because that's still my favorite campaign. Bill, Lewis, Zoe, and Francis are probably my favorite video game protagonists. We may or may not ever get a new installment in the series. We'll probably never find out what happened to the 3 remaining survivors of the original and the 4 survivors in the sequel, but I'm totally fine with that. The online community is still here creating new content and experiences. I don't see any other game coming close to what Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 have achieved in terms of online co-op. Shortly after Left 4 Dead's release, Valve South, previously known as Turtle Rock Studios, was shut down by Valve. Most of their employees moved to Washington to be closer to Valve's office, where they began working on the sequel. As a result, the game felt a lot more campy than the first installment's darker tone, which makes sense because it was Valve's suggestion for Turtle Rock to change the original cast design to contrast against the brooding atmosphere. I feel that Valve could have made Left 4 Dead without Turtle Rock Studios, but Turtle Rock could have never made Left 4 Dead without Valve. The split between the two companies was a long time coming, said Phil Robb to Eurogamer. Co-developing and working on one product when both teams, 2 super tight-knit teams, are 800 miles apart, it's a nightmare. At the end of the day, after we shipped it, no one was really happy with how it worked. Whenever we were working with Valve, it was kind of crazy. They take their time, you know? Valve time's a well-known thing, but for us, it was like, we want to get this shit done. Turtle Rock got their name back and resumed their operations independently to get shit done their way. But their way was shit. Turtle Rock followed up Left 4 Dead with a series of duds that try to replicate the magic of the game that helped launch their careers. They marketed themselves as the creators of Left 4 Dead, which came with a set of high expectations, none of which they were ever able to meet.
As creators of Left 4 Dead, we want to take what made the zombie co-op shooter experience so fun, and then couple that with modern day graphics, modern day technology.
After finishing their last batch of DLC for Left 4 Dead, they developed and published Leap Sheep. This really set the precedent for what followed. Their first attempt at a Left 4 Dead spiritual successor was Evolve, a microtransaction-heavy game that sucked. 5 years later, they teased their next big project, Leap Sheep 2, Back 4 Blood, which I was very excited about upon hearing the announcement. Then it was released.
Oh, this is gonna be fine! Just fine.
I gotta be honest, I didn't play this one. I lost all interest after seeing gameplay. Everything that made Left 4 Dead work so well doesn't seem to be present here. The art direction isn't appealing, the level design looks unintuitive, the UI is messy, and the infected, known as the Ridden, run at you like they just shit themselves. The infected in Left 4 Dead behave with some sense of humanity intact, however far gone they may be. Before you engage them, you can see them stumbling around like lost souls. It's only when you capture their attention do they sprint at you like rabid animals. Small details like their wardrobe key you into the type of person they were before they got infected. For example, the infected in Letterman jackets always stood out to me. I imagine when they were forced to evacuate their homes, they grabbed a piece of clothing that had a lot of sentimental value. Let's juxtapose this against Back 4 Blood's infected.
KSC Stronghouse not far from here. We can resupply there before heading out.
I'm more partial to Evolve because at least it was trying something different with the co-op formula, but this was straight up trying to be Left 4 Dead 3, and it could never live up to that title. Rumors have circulated for years about Left 4 Dead 3's supposed development. There were leaked photos from the inside of Valve's office, alleged screenshots, and early concept art. Apparently the setting was going to be in an entirely different country. Valve released an official statement on the matter to put an end to the speculation and misinformation. They told IGN, "We did briefly explore some Left 4 Dead next-gen opportunities a few years ago, but we are absolutely not working on anything L4D related now, and haven't for years." Do we need Left 4 Dead 3?
Yes! Yes! Oh god, yes!
Gabe Newell doesn't seem to think so, and I can rationalize his stance. Valve seems to be more interested in creating titles that breed user-created content for its online community to thrive in years after its initial launch. Their first DLC for Left 4 Dead included a software development kit for PC users to create their own campaigns to share with others online. In a press release, Newell said, "Since Half-Life launched in 1998, Valve has made continuous efforts to expand the offering of its products beyond what's included on the day of launch. With Half-Life and Counter-Strike, and more recently Team Fortress 2, we've learned that we're no longer making standalone games, but creating entertainment services. With Left 4 Dead, we're extending that tradition by creating additional gameplay and releasing our internal tools to aspiring developers, so they may also create and distribute new Left 4 Dead experiences." Here we are a decade later and the online community is still thriving. In fact, PC users were blindsided by the announcement of a brand new major update that included new weapons, animations, PvP enhancements, previously unused voice lines being added in, and a brand new campaign. This update was a collaborative effort by the community for the community. Valve sponsored the development, which made it officially canon. What other company do you know of that's not only willing to update a 10-year-old game, but to let the fans do it themselves? The month the update launched, the game saw an increase of players online that hadn't been seen since December of 2013, when Left 4 Dead was free to download for one day only. These returning players likely had the game, played it for some time, and stopped for whatever reason, only to return when its first major update in years dropped. The reason I bought an Xbox 360 all those years ago was because of Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. It was by far my two most played titles, and I had a lot of fun while it lasted, but eventually they did grow stale. Recently, I picked them up again on PC because in terms of updates, it's light years ahead of its console ports. Revisiting these titles on PC with those quality of life improvements proved to be a refreshing experience. I don't see myself stopping anytime soon, but when that day eventually comes, I know I'll be back for another round when the next major update drops. I hope to see you there.
We'll be right back.
Where's Jimmy? He said he'd meet us here.
Wait, there's Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy, what you got there?
It's this new game, Left 4 Dead 2. You fight zombies and boomers and other creatures of the night. Use the light gun to fight off hordes of monsters and stop the impending zombie apocalypse.
Cool, can I get next?
No, I got next. Left 4 Dead, now available for the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Yeah, Billy's calling Ronald McDonald.
So, this is Ethan. New Rats coming soon. Remember to comment. And I might just put a link to your site. Thank you.